Cyrus, it's a pleasure to welcome you. You work for an awesome company, you do awesome stuff, and what intrigued most people is when you talk about innovation, especially with Google, you said it's all about scale. Don't come to us with mediocre dreams and mediocre ideas.
That's right.
So let's start from there. The thought process that goes into, shipping out the big ideas.
It's a great question. We from the very early days, we wanted to solve very big problems. I mean, if you think the very first problem Google solved, or tried to solve, was cataloging the entire internet, right? Which is audacious, but the wins and the rewards are so much bigger if you can reach for those really big dreams, right? And you talked about the other examples, right? Of teaching a car to drive itself, right? Or providing internet to an entire country that never had it before, right? And how do you do that at scale? So yeah, thinking big is one of the biggest things that's ingrained in the DNA of every Google employee, I would say.
Yeah. You just mentioned connected cars and car mobility. When we did this conference 6 years back, nobody would have thought about Uber.
Right.
Now Uber is part of an everyday lifestyle reality. How far-fetched, because people who are not part of this ecosystem thinks it's a moonshot still, to have a driverless car, how safe, how convenient, how easy will it be?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is still, to some degrees, it is still a moonshot, but we did get to the moon, right, eventually. So as crazy as it sounded, we were going to land a man on the moon. We ended up doing it because we knew we had to. The good news is, I think this is one for sure where the conversation has shifted from if it's ever going to happen to when. And the reason we know it shifted to when is now we have every single major auto manufacturer involved in doing this. They're investing huge amounts of people and money in this. Uber is investing in this. Google is investing in this. Tesla. So this is not one of those where we're wondering, is this really going to make it? We already see, if you go to Silicon Valley now, by the way, as I go all the time to the Bay Area, I mean, there's cars driving themselves right next to me all the time. I look over, there's a self-driving car, stops at the light, turns, knows where to go, watches out for other cars, watches for pedestrians, bicyclists. California has so many bicyclists, right? So it's very much a reality. And like you said, there are hurdles still. There's still things they have to get through on making sure it stays completely safe and all those things.
So when Google started, it's all about deep algorithm, deep machine learning. At the time, even Google probably didn't have a fair idea of how it's going to impact people's lives. Now with Alphabet separating out and looking at all these innovative technologies, we're looking at how it is going to impact the lives of billions of people around the world. And one important aspect of this is healthcare.
That's right.
And you mentioned about the contact lens that can read pretty much many things. So let you elaborate on that.
Yeah, healthcare is one of those things that is going to impact every single human being in the world, right? But to give you an example of a totally audacious goal, Larry and Sergey sat back and said, what's one thing that affects every single person? Death. I said, let's look into that and solve that. Can you imagine any bigger goal in the world than let's solve death and figure out, and so they have a company that's working on this, right? Looking at extending life up to an indefinite point, right? Now again, that makes people feel a little uncomfortable, right? As the old saying, there's only two things for sure in this world, death and taxes. Yeah. You're saying one of those is maybe not the case, right? And so, but again, that's an example of how Google thinks, right? The Calico company and Verily and a lot of these companies that we have focus specifically on healthcare and making people's lives better. So it's very exciting.
On a lighter note, half the population or more would prefer the taxes to go away.
That's true. I wonder if they would choose that over not know that. It's a good question.
So what are you currently working on that makes you excited every day?
So I'm fortunate, I mentioned it briefly earlier, I'm very excited because I'm in the education space, and I feel that's actually what I'm currently responsible for is Android and Chrome devices in education, and bringing Android tablets and Chromebooks to millions and millions of kids is what we do, right? All over the world, and for the first time in a classroom to have kids have access to what we all have, right? The entire world's information at their disposal will change the world much more than we can imagine, because now the teacher's no longer going to teach you memorization type stuff, right? When we grew up, they taught us the capitals of every country or the capitals of every state in the US. Why would you do that anymore? You can look it up in 5 seconds. So the more important thing is to teach them how to solve problems, how to innovate, how to be creative, right? Those 21st century skills. And so I think that's one of the biggest shifts that's happening, right? Is what is happening with technology in the classroom, and how can we make all of these kids become the next, Larry and Sergey, the next innovators that go out and really, cure death kind of thing.
Yeah. And finally, Google always, focuses on excellence in its employees and the culture it inculcates for people to stay there as long as possible. So besides the good person, the good food, and everything else, excellence is what it focuses on, and that's, I think, a good and somewhat not so good, because people who are smart but don't have the right kind of degrees from good universities, feel left out. So do you look at balancing this out?
We do. I'll tell you, it's completely true that it obviously doesn't hurt if you come from an Ivy League and you were, summa cum laude, but we get people from every university. If you are a big thinker, if you are an entrepreneur and you don't even have a degree, we have lots of people that don't even have a degree, great. But you're doing great things, we will notice you, we will talk to you, we will interview you, absolutely. So, yes, a good solid education is helpful, but we don't want it to be that only the people that could get to or afford those big universities come into Google. So you'll see them from every university imaginable. I mean, you know how big Google is now. So yeah, I would say we do want a very, very diverse background, and it helps us to actually have a very diverse background.
Great. I think it's good news for people watching out there.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you. It's a pleasure again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.